Okay, good morning. I think we are on time to start. Thank you very much for joining us this morning to our concurrent session number 4. Let's see, on the recovery zero emission from the ocean. Can you have some slides just to show the overall theme of the concurrent session? Yes, thank you. Okay, so this is our today's theme, Action for Beyond Zero Emissions Society in the light of COVID-19, with a focus on gender equality. And we have very distinguished speakers today, from both from the government as well as from private sector, leading the innovation and development of the sustainable energy strategy and technology research in the field from the utilizing the ocean resource for the zero emission and solving the climate crisis. As we understand that ICEF, as Innovation for Plural Forum, this is the 7th annual meeting, and I heard that there are some discussions about utilizing the ocean resource for innovation for Blue Earth before. This is the first time that the ICEF put together a concurrent session just dedicated to the ocean resource. And they're thinking about sustainability from the ocean. So there'll be a great opportunity for all of us to spend some time this morning to talk about the possibility of incorporating ocean to our common effort in solving climate crisis. And also, at the time when we are facing an unprecedented challenge of the COVID-19, and everyone in the world are now thinking about how to recover from this greatest economic impact that we are facing today. And the session here, there is a focus of what we call blue recovery. So when we are talking about green and blue and other recovery from this COVID, we would like to have some discussions from the viewpoint of the blue recovery, using this as a great opportunity to advance our utilization of the ocean in the sort of heart of this blue recovery strategy. Now, the other overreaching theme for this ICEF this year is gender equality. However, unfortunately, I have to announce that this morning, I just heard from one of the speakers from Palau, the Ambassador Olai Uludong, has suddenly fell sick. And she's not feeling well this morning, so she cannot join us to present her views, particularly from the South Pacific Islands state strategy for recovery, as well as some examples from Palau's current programs utilizing solar and other sustainable energy source as a model for small developing islands. And also being a female leader at the United Nations, representing Palau, she was able to tell us something about her view from the gender equality. Unfortunately, she wouldn't be able to join us this morning, so 4 gentlemen we have to somehow cover some of the gender issue if we can later in the discussion. Anyway, without further ado, I would like to ask the three speakers in turn to give a brief introduction at the beginning of the session, and then we'll turn into the discussion centering around these important issues of how we can utilize the ocean. So let me first ask Mr. Mark Leybourne from the World Bank. He's a senior energy specialist, and he would give us not only some of the offshore wind potential, but also more in broad sense of what the blue recovery effort that we are going to be discussing today. So, Mark, the floor is yours.
Hello, my name is Mark Leybourne. I'm a senior energy specialist at the World Bank, and I co-lead the World Bank Group's Offshore Wind Development Programme. I'm going to talk about two topics related to Beyond Zero from our oceans. Firstly, the World Bank's PROBLUE initiative, which is supporting the sustainable development of blue economies. And secondly, I'll give an introduction to our offshore wind development programme. About 71% of the Earth's surface is ocean, and billions of people depend on the oceans for their livelihoods. The UN's Sustainable Development Goal 14 aims to conserve and sustainably use the ocean, seas and marine resources for sustainable development. So the concept of the blue economy supports all of SDGs 14's goals, encapsulating multiple economic sectors and seeking to promote growth, improve livelihoods and ensure our oceans and coastal resources are used sustainably. The ocean economy is currently valued at around $1.5 trillion per annum, and this is expected to double by 2030. It's crucial, therefore, that we do this in a balanced way, protecting our environments as well as people. Furthermore, our oceans will play a crucial role in our changing climate, especially as they act as the largest carbon sink on Earth, and that we're turning more and more to our seas to provide us with more sustainable resources such as food, energy, medicines and minerals. The World Bank's programme for the blue economy, PROBLUE, as it is known, is a multi-donor trust fund that was established in October 2018 with the aim of achieving integrated and sustainable economic development in healthy oceans. With the World Bank's Blue Economy Action Plan at its foundation, PROBLUE contributes to the implementation of SDG 14 and is fully aligned with the World Bank's twin goals of ending extreme poverty and increasing the income and welfare of the poor in a sustainable way. PROBLUE is part of the bank's overall blue economy programme, which as of March 2020 amounted to around $5.6 billion in active projects. And as you can see here, the programme's got four pillars. Firstly, improving fisheries by tackling the underlying causes of overfishing and addressing aquaculture in a sustainable way. Second, addressing the threats posed by ocean health, by marine pollution, including things like litter and plastics from marine or land-based sources. The third pillar is looking at sustainable development of key ocean sectors such as tourism, marine transport and offshore renewable energy. And the fourth pillar is helping to build government capacity to manage marine resources, including nature-based infrastructure such as mangroves. And it's doing this through three main areas of work: generating knowledge and analytical work to support policy decisions, providing technical assistance to build country capacity for designing and implementing interventions into the blue economy, and thirdly, to increase impact through supporting investments into the blue economy. There are also a number of cross-cutting issues that are being interwoven throughout the programme, including gender and climate change, amongst others. So the World Bank Group's Offshore Wind Development Programme was started about 18 months ago and has the objective to accelerate the adoption of offshore wind into emerging markets. And it's intending to support the development of a pipeline of bankable projects, really building upon the successes that we've seen in offshore wind in established markets such as Northern Europe. And it's a joint World Bank, SMAP, and an IFC program, with the World Bank obviously providing finance to the public sector and IFC providing finance to the private sector. And similarly to PROBLUE, this program has also got three components. Firstly, at a global level, providing knowledge generation and exchange. Secondly, at a country level, providing roadmaps and technical assistance. And thirdly, working to develop projects and investment plan preparation. So just briefly summarize some of the work we've been doing on knowledge and generation and exchange. We've undertaken some events such as study tours, provided some reports looking at technical potential of offshore wind resources, including in maps for 56 countries, looking at over 15 terawatts of offshore wind potential. And we're planning additional studies and activities, including a training course and a flagship report to come out next year, and looking at the successful development of offshore wind. Typically, when we work with a country, we'll start with a workshop with the government and key stakeholders. And following a request from a government for support from our program, we'll usually start with a roadmap, which we scope to include the important aspects within a country that need to be considered, but also looking at all of the different aspects that go into setting up an offshore wind industry. From there, we can also start to support work to investigate individual projects, with a view to eventually providing lower cost financing to public infrastructure, or the IFC can work in the private sector, providing lending alongside commercial banks and other lenders. To date, we've worked with a number of countries, including Vietnam, where we've just published a draft roadmap for consultation. We're just starting work with Sri Lanka and Turkey on their roadmaps, and have also got studies that have been agreed with governments in Azerbaijan, Colombia, India, and soon hopefully the Philippines. And on the right here is an example of some of the geospatial work we've already been undertaking for Sri Lanka to look at some constraints around their seas. The Offshore Wind Development Programme has already received funding from Pillar 3 of the PROBLUE programme, and the objective of this work is to enhance the sustainability of offshore wind in these emerging markets. And the first main activity in this work has been to create these environmental and social frameworks which help our client governments to plan offshore wind at a country scale, incorporating environmental and social aspects to a good industry practice, and also incorporating World Bank and IFC environmental and social standards, which are incredibly important if future projects are going to be able to obtain international financing. We're also undertaking geospatial mapping at a country level to identify sites, and we're also will be helping in the preparation of projects to make sure that environmental and social aspects are included into the planning and permitting of offshore wind, again to a good industry practice to enable international financing to be obtained. So just to conclude, the development of a sustainable blue economy is being actively supported by the World Bank Group across a range of programs and initiatives. The PROBLUE program is a key part of the World Bank's Blue Economy program, and is supporting a wide range of work at a global, regional and country level. And the Offshore Wind Development Programme is actively working with governments in developing countries to help incorporate offshore wind sustainably into their future energy strategies. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Mark. When we show the presentation, when we come back to the discussion, I want to turn back to you and maybe ask some questions about what are some of the difficulties of a multi-stakeholder kind of platform in bringing in the developing countries and working internationally in incorporating, addressing some of the projects that you have. discuss today. And also, if there's some sort of you feel some impact of the COVID, whether it's minimal or maybe major, I don't know. But as you are now developing this project, if you have some sense of sort of perspective of what's coming next in terms of the recovery report. And so anyway, we'll come back to that after all the presentations. Okay, so next, now we have two distinguished speakers from private sector who actually leads the innovation in the advancing technology in the, particularly in the offshore, more broad sense of new energy solutions utilizing the ocean resources. So Mr. Karsten Stoltenberg, please. The floor is yours. He's from the country
Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for the kind invitation to this panel and giving me the opportunity to present my company's perspectives on a sustainable ocean economy. I look forward to a good debate in the panel after this virtual and pre-recorded intervention. My name is Karsten Stoltenberg, and I am representing Equinor, a Norwegian energy company which since 2018 has an office in Tokyo to be part of the emerging Japanese offshore wind industry. Equinor was founded in 1972 to develop offshore oil and gas resources under the Norwegian North Sea. Since back then, we have developed into a global energy company. We are present in more than 40 countries. With more than 40 offshore oil and gas installations, Equinor is the world's largest offshore oil and gas operator. We have installed and operate 160 offshore wind turbines, and several hundreds will be installed in the next 3 to 4 years. In addition, we have 160 vessels sailing each day to support our operations and transport our products. But with scale comes responsibility. Safe and sound operations and coexistence with marine species, coastal communities and other maritime industries is our priority. Utilizing the potential of the oceans does not only come with opportunities, but also with risks. Today, human activities are threatening the health of the ocean and putting enormous pressure on the marine ecosystem. Equinor recognizes these tremendous challenges. Our response and approach to these challenges, but also the opportunities, can be summarized around three main pillars. First, protect. Second, produce. And third, prosper. Firstly, we need to do our best to protect the ocean by preventing harm from our operations. When Equinor starts to work on an offshore project, whether in wind or oil and gas, we can spend several years trying to understand environmental and seabed conditions, stakeholder concerns, and our potential impact on the environment. We collaborate with other developers and research institutions on new ways to make these assessments and to minimize impacts. For example, detecting marine mammals with acoustic receivers to give data for assessments, or employing bubble curtain to limit noise disturbance when we install the wind turbines to minimize impact. Now to the second pillar of our strategy, produce. As a company, we are transforming our business and operations to support and accelerate the energy transition and ensure a business model in line with the Paris Agreement. We aim to reach carbon-neutral global operations by 2030 and have set clear and ambitious targets for increasing our renewable energy business. The following activities illustrate this. Firstly, to further reduce CO2 emissions during operations of our offshore installations, we supply CO2-free electricity produced either on or offshore to our platforms instead of using gas turbines on the platforms. Secondly, Equinor supports work to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in the maritime sector and participates in projects to use green ammonia and liquid hydrogen in vessels. And thirdly, We have a clear ambition to substantially expand our activities in offshore wind and become a globally leading company in the offshore wind industry. The potential for offshore wind is enormous, and I will come back to this topic later. And finally, the third pillar. By acting as a responsible operator and providing the world with sustainable energy or resources from the oceans, we believe Equinor is not only creating value for the company, but also value for society, generating jobs and new opportunities for the coastal communities. Ensuring coexistence with other industries and respecting the needs of local communities are key success factors for the sustainability of our business. Cooperation across companies and across countries is fundamental for achieving sustainable use of oceans. We participate actively in numerous initiatives, such as the advisory network of the High-Level Panel for a Sustainable Ocean Economy, a group of 14 head of states, including the Norwegian and Japanese Prime Minister. As part of the industry response to the High-Level Panel, Equinor, together with other offshore wind developers, have established the Ocean Renewable Energy Action Committee, called OREAC. On World Ocean Day in June this year, OREAC announced its vision for 1,400 gigawatt of offshore wind by 2050 to drive decarbonization. With 1,400 gigawatt, offshore wind could produce 1/10 of global electricity demand. This will save over 2.5 billion tons of CO2 annually, which is nearly 10% of the global annual greenhouse gas emission reductions needed to remain on a Paris-compliant pathway in 2050. It could create around 20 million years of employment by 2050. Offshore wind can in addition promote better health by reducing air pollution, increase the energy security by reducing dependence on expensive imported fuels, and save billions of liters of water. In December this year, OREAC will launch its roadmap for 2050, which will outline the actions needed to support industry and policymakers in achieving the 1,400 gigawatt vision. Offshore wind is still in an early phase of deployment, so far in shallow waters close to shore. Innovative technology and the increasing size of wind turbines and wind farms have contributed to the success of offshore wind so far and will be key factors for its future success. The next speaker will revert to this topic in his presentation. Since most of the offshore wind potential and the best wind conditions are in deeper waters, the future of offshore wind will be with floating installations. Equinor is one of the pioneers and leading companies in floating offshore wind, from first full-scale pilots in 2009 to the first floating wind farm in 2017 and the next generation floating wind farm to be commissioned in 2022. While the industry works on technical innovation and optimizing construction and operation, further progress for floating offshore wind will only happen if governments demonstrate a clear willingness to support floating wind projects at larger scale. Achieving this together in a public-private dialogue is our ambition, together with OREAC, in many countries, including Japan. So, in short, we need to be ambitious, work responsibly and collectively to ensure the future success of ocean renewable energy. Thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you, Karsten. Very good overview of the private sector and its role in advancing the sustainable energy solution using the ocean. And especially OREAC that you mentioned with the collaboration with the UN High-Level Panel, which is a very interesting kind of a setup of at the highest level of the global agenda, where you see the private sector partnership working very closely with the head of states that are really addressing non-sustainable blue ocean recovery. So maybe I'll come back to that and maybe ask you questions of how this kind of framework is set up and how it's working as a dialogue at this higher level. But before that, I finally get to turn to the invite Mr. Masato Yamada, the Vice President of the Regional Manager of Asia Pacific of MHI Vesta Offshore Wind. He'll be the leading expert in technological innovation in the area of offshore wind. So I'm looking forward to it. So, Mr. Yamada, the floor is yours. And I think when we come back to the discussion, I have specific more questions about the sort of quantum leap in the technology that you mentioned, particularly about the turbine technology. As I know MHI has been developing these basic technologies for years. But what would be the kind of factors actually led to this quantum leap? Is it a demand perspective, demand or investment, or some kind of breakthrough in some particular technology? And if you have some other sort of challenges that you see in terms of even developing further to bring down the cost of some of those offshore wind technology or broad sense of the commercial sector. But anyway, we have about half an hour for discussion, and we have quite a few number of questions that are being asked to this panel. So before I turn into those questions, as I said before, I want to come back to the three speakers with one sort of specific questions that I already kind of mentioned. And also with your additional comments, if you after hearing other speakers' presentations, if you wanted to make an additional comments or some of the things that you wanted to be emphasized in your presentation, I would appreciate that. But anyway, Mark, as I said, well, you're the sort of the leading this global effort in bringing in the offshore wind, such a blue economy project as a sort of a economic development program, including developing countries. Do you see any current sort of change in sort of accepting as this as a new source of development? Is the people's understanding of utilizing ocean as something that is has a great potential, and how much is it that in a global sense that people are now really looking at this as a great opportunity? And are there any other sort of challenges that you faced in bringing in the stakeholders like the other, environment and other concerns that people have about the utilization?
Sure, good, and it's a great question, and there's lots of bits to that. So let's start with the way we've seen the industry change a little bit. I think a lot of governments and countries still see offshore wind as this fairly new technology that's still potentially expensive and a little bit far off in the distance, maybe not for them. And I think that's the result of the industry accelerating and growing and evolving very rapidly in the last 5 years. That we've now got to a case where we've got a fairly mature industry, particularly in established markets in Northern Europe and elsewhere. And actually, this is now becoming a reality for a lot of countries that maybe hadn't considered offshore wind before. So part of the work we're doing is trying to educate decision makers, policymakers about offshore wind and the opportunities that they have, and that this technology could provide substantial benefits, not only from renewable energy and power to their economies, but also, that economic benefits piece, the jobs that could be brought along with it, and the potential exports, as well as the investments from other sectors. So, it's the potential I see in this sector is phenomenal. It's huge, and as the ORIAC target is quite rightly stating 1,400 gigawatts by 2050. That's a fraction of the global potential. We can do more, obviously, over the years, but we've got a wonderful opportunity. We've got about 30 gigawatts at the moment of offshore wind installed, but that is growing at a rapid pace, and we'll see hundreds of gigawatts installed over the coming couple of decades. So I think it's an exciting place to be, and it's exactly the right time to be thinking about offshore wind.
Thank you. We'll come back to that again. But next, I'd like to ask Karsten. As I mentioned, you talked about this high-level panel at the United Nations and how the Equinor, being one of the key partners in the private sector, working with the this highest level of decision or the global effort at the UN high level from the private sector. How is this setup really came about? And some of the audience may not really sure of what's this sort of industry association with the collaboration at the level at the United Nations. I know the former Prime Minister Abe also signed up in this high-level panel, and it's been one of the main sort of pillars of global discussions on the sustainable ocean. So you wanted to add some additional information around this first?
Thank you for the question. Thank you for your interest in OREC and in offshore wind in general. I think one of the things that Equinor has realized, and probably all companies have realized, building a new industry like offshore wind can only be done in a dialogue between a public-private dialogue. We very much appreciate the work that is done by the high-level panel. And as a response to their ideas, the ideas they have launched, we felt that these ideas could be best answered or supported by a coalition of different stakeholders in the offshore wind industry. And so we assembled several developers, also my colleague here from MHI Vestas. MHI Vestas is also participating in this coalition. We have also the World Bank, I think, participating in that coalition. So we are trying to kind of bring the practical guidance to the ambition that the high level panel sets. I think that's the idea behind it, as far as I see it, and I'm quite thankful and that so many companies and institutions are contributing to this coalition.
Excellent. So you have this slide talking about different topics. How are they formed? As a sort of as a membership sort of style, or is it just sort of kind of a technological and private sector sort of kind of industry platform where you actually meet or have some dialogue and then to work with the government? I mean, OREC is already a formal group.
Yeah,
as I understand it, right?
That's correct. No, the companies are working together, commissioning also studies that support us in our advice to the governments how to achieve the ambition and the targets that we are promoting. We believe with 1,400 gigawatt we come with an ambitious but achievable target. The World Bank representative actually told some 2 minutes ago that there's much more to come, and there's much more to come. So so we might need to revise the number upwards. But it's all about, and I think this has been mentioned by Mark. This is also giving the practical advice to the governments on how to create the right framing to really capture the potential. And that's what we are aiming for. It's not only putting out a number, but also giving the practical advice on how to establish the right framing, how to attract the industry, how to attract the supply industry, to bring their competence to the table, because that's quite central for building a new industry. You have to attract as many players as possible, to bring as many ideas to the table as possible. And to bring also competition to the table, because we've seen one thing in Europe: competition brings down cost.
energizes people to bring even better ideas to the table, and that is, I think, that's the main source of the success that offshore wind has seen in Europe, and that is something that we want to bring out to other countries, and we are very thankful for the support we're getting from so many players there.
Great, thank you. Of course, the competition is also great for innovation as well. And now I wanted to ask Mr. Yamada about this quantum leap in offshore wind technology. How did it really happen? What was the sort of in your mind that really led to sort of revolutionize? I think it's a too slow word, but in bringing this technological advance in the field, in the area of offshore, especially as you have mentioned, in AI, with very tremendous history of development of turbine technology, as well as other technologies that are needed to develop this big project. And also, what do you see a challenge, a technological challenge that you see that needs to be further into either cost down or even developing or building offshore wind, not near the coast, but maybe to the really high sea area and others, either floating or any other technological wise and so on and so forth. But if you see provide some of the technological roadmap into future of offshore wind.
Yeah, thank you for question. And about the technology, we, especially Japanese people, tend to think about very advanced technology, new technology, any, very, how to say, it's totally new technology. But what I've seen in the success of the offshore wind, especially in Europe, is not always just a brand new technology. It's more maturing of the technology and also more massive volume to make it mature and also to reduce the cost of the products. We are sometimes forgetting the necessity of such a scale and volume and repetition of the production and also the projects. So we need both the new technology innovation, especially some materials or structure or totally new systems or any challenges. But also on the other hand, we need to produce more and more and more to reduce the cost. So I think we need both pillars. And as Karsten said, in the offshore wind industry in Europe was driven by the competition. So competition drove the technology innovation and also the cost reduction. It's very fierce competition, but I think it's very healthy for all the industry, and finally to reduce the levelized cost of energy of the offshore wind. It can really be value for all the people, not only in the industry but also consumers and all the government.
Thank you, Mr. Yamada. We'll come back to some of the technological challenges in the future, especially when we are facing in Japan, where I don't see much of that competition happening. Maybe, I don't know, like the case of Europe, maybe there's some challenges when we are talking about this in a more context in Japan. But yes. Anyway, I have some good questions from the audience. First, let's see. Maybe this could be addressed to Mark. It says, which country, for example, has been a pioneer in using the oceans to mitigate climate change in general? Maybe, Karsten mentioned about the European companies' effort. I know that Equinor has been working on this area for quite some time, but let's see. Mark, you wanted to tackle this? See which country you see as right now very actively engaged in this, or even including some of the developing countries, maybe We know that the Shishel and others are very much really emphasizing, blue economy, financing, and other things. But do you see any of this?
I mean, I think you're right in that the sort of Northern Europe and particularly sort of around the North Sea region, there's been so much productivity from the sea there historically, oil and gas, marine transport, fishing. And maybe in some cases that hasn't been done in the most sustainable of manners. And I think that has been changing a lot over recent years. I know there's a lot of initiatives there to improve planning and the sustainability of the use of the seas in that region. Particularly now with the introduction of offshore wind and over the last couple of decades into the North Sea, it's quickly becoming a very, very green hub for there's a lot of other countries are learning from, and those best practices, good practices are being taken elsewhere. What we're seeing, I suppose, I can comment a little bit on the PROBLUE funding that has been been running in the bank. I know a lot of their work and interest is particularly in Southeast Asia, again, where you have a lot of dependence on the sea from a livelihood perspective, but also a lot of issues that they're facing, climate change as well as things like pollution. So that there's a huge interest there in changing the ways that they're maybe going about some activities, improving things like sustainable fishing, sustainable aquaculture as well. I think that there's certainly a lot more to do and a lot of work to go forward. And from the offshore wind perspective, we're seeing plenty of interest from around the world and the countries that we work with in offshore wind, as I said, as a new technology. But again, there's plenty of lessons that could be learnt from established markets, but also lessons that some of these countries will have to learn themselves from a local perspective.
Thank you. Karsten, you wanted to, that Northern Europe, of course. Do you see any other area or countries that are very much now interested in getting into the act?
I think if you look at the numbers, the majority of offshore wind capacity is installed in Europe, in the North Sea basin, to be even more precise. We have, of course, China that has installed quite a bit of offshore wind capacity, relatively shallow waters near shore. And probably China, within Asia is one of the biggest potential markets also for the future. So those are the pioneers that I would say. They have embraced the opportunities first, but shouldn't forget that Japan is also one of the countries that have many years ago already put a lot of emphasis on developing the technology for floating offshore wind, for example. And NEDO is one of the institutions that has been instrumental for that. So a lot of pioneering work has also been done in Japan. And I would think in terms of regulations, Japan is one of the countries that has a relatively complete framework for regulation of the industry now in place. We have a feed-in tariff system that has been in place since 2012. Predominantly so far used by the solar and onshore wind industry, but it's also available for the offshore wind industry in the future. And some 1.5 years ago, a new law was passed here in the Parliament that gives the legal frame also for offshore wind developments. And I think that's a huge step forward, and I can only commend the Japanese government for taking that step. So I think in that sense, Japan is also one of the pioneers, even though the numbers don't speak for that yet. But we're quite hopeful, and that's why we're here. That Japanese government and Japan will be a fast follower. Let's call it this way.
Thank you. You know that Prime Minister Suga made a deregulation as the kind of centerpiece of his administration. And I want to come back to that issue of Japan with Mr. Yamada later. maybe towards the end of this discussion. But going back to more in general about, there's a question about finance. In order to achieve blue economy, how is private finance fundraised? What is the role of private finance in this sector? Mark, you wanted to just briefly, or even Karsten, or how is this private sector financed?
Talk briefly, I think I'll probably keep my remarks towards offshore wind because that's my area of expertise.
Yes, that's right.
I mean, there is a role for both public and private sector finance, and typically offshore wind projects, the generation assets are private sector finance. In some cases, some of the transmission assets are funded by the public sector. And actually, there's some interest there from the bank in that we were able to lend to the public sector, whereas IFC, who's a partner of the program, is able to lend to the private sector. But there's a huge role for the private sector to finance offshore wind. That's where the vast majority, well, almost all of the money is going to come from. It's going to have to come from international sources. It's unlikely that it's all going to come from within the home country. So I think it's very important to make sure that projects are developed to allow and enable them to be bankable and acceptable to international financiers, and that includes, as I mentioned in my presentation, taking into account environmental and social topics into the regulations of permitting. Have we lost Sunami? Karsten, maybe you want to talk about
well, I think
private sector financier.
There's not so much to add to what you said. I think you're right in terms of where the finance comes from. Particularly, I think one of the things that most countries need to work on is to adapt the power grid to the requirements of new sources of electricity. Let's call it this way. Offshore wind obviously will be placed somewhere else than the traditional means of power production are placed. So in most countries, to one or the other, to a larger or to a smaller degree, you need to invest into power grid to be able to connect the offshore wind farms. And that's definitely an area where public finance, it depends a little bit on the regulation or the structure of the grid industry in that respective country, but there where public finance probably is more dominant than in the offshore wind farm investments as such, which are predominantly privately funded, except for, and I mentioned NEDO earlier, pilot projects that have been to a large extent financed publicly. But the public sector or the governments have a key role in kicking off the industry. We've seen that in Europe, and it's true for all countries. The revenue stabilization, either be it in the feed-in tariff with a feed-in tariff system or similar, is an important aspect of being able to finance these large infrastructure investments. So predictability of income helps the financiers of offshore wind farms immensely to take that leap of faith and bring the money, the necessary money to the table. So in that sense, the public plays a big role, and of course. That is an initial financing or initial way of supporting the industry. In Europe, we have managed to bring down the cost to a level where we have so-called no subsidy auctions, i.e. where the developers are developing the offshore wind farm without additional payments from the government. But that is in most countries usually along the road, so it takes some years to develop the industry to that maturity level.
Notice that we've lost our chair, so maybe I'll just jump in and just put a chair hat on for a minute. I know we've been asked to talk about COVID and how the industry has been responding to that. So, Yamada, perhaps you could talk a little bit about how you've seen the crisis and how has that affected supplying turbines to projects and your supply chain as well, maybe.
Yes, COVID-19 actually had some influence on our daily business to deliver the turbine, the manufacturing and construction, and also the service. But fortunately, in our companies, our employees deal with the challenges very well and very flexible way, and also with a very good discipline. So we didn't have a significant delay of the production or delivery, or so it was good experience. But we also had a very big challenge about moving people from the site to site, or construction in the construction vessels or service sites. So, and also we are now reaching out to the Asian market. So we have had so many travelers from the Denmark or UK to Asian country, but it was totally stopped. So it's a big challenge to transfer the technology or experience to the new region. So we are now more focusing on the localized people, not only products, but also the people, and knowledge should be localized quickly. So that's a very big takeaway from the current COVID situation.
Okay, great. And Karsten, perhaps you want to talk a little bit about how you've seen it, and has it affected your projects and schedule in any way, or is it just been a blip that you've now managed to get over?
Well, I mean, we all probably individually have seen how COVID has affected our lives by working from home, being locked down. So it definitely had an effect for some time on the industry. Not dramatic as I've seen so far. As a company, we have seen some delays on projects, mainly in the oil and gas sphere of our company. On the offshore side, it looks as if the implications are manageable. But of course, we don't know how long this is going to last, what waves are coming up, how much lockdown we have to cope with in the future. So it remains to be seen whether there will be long-term major impacts on the industry. But definitely one point that Yamada-san pointed out, this industry is moving knowledge from Europe, the cradle of offshore wind, into other regions. Mm-hmm. And of course, moving knowledge is related also to being able to move people, and that is definitely quite restricted for the time being. So a lot of the moving of knowledge is done virtually, like we are doing it here today. And we all have our private opinions about how effective and how good that is, but it works. But it would be nice if we could supplement it also by physical being together once in a while.
I think so.
Couldn't agree more. And I suppose from the bank's perspective and the program that we're working on, I suppose initially there was this lull in interest from governments in working with the program, because they were just swamped with having to deal with the crisis. But I think now, as things have stabilized a little bit, people are starting to think to the future, and I know it's been mentioned a lot of times, but the idea of a green recovery has started to become more important, and there's an opportunity here that they can benefit from fairly large-scale infrastructure investments and funding to support future offshore wind development, as well as things like transmission development and port development. Particularly when you're talking about financing, the stability that you can be given by something like a long-term asset of offshore wind, especially if you've got a decent PPA that's going to give you certainty, is going to be far more attractive than many other investments and assets, I suppose, at this time.
Exactly, we are also really expecting and we're looking forward to the green recovery, the funding and the investment in the several countries, including Japan. Like Denmark or Germany, very quickly just announced the project plan, and also Japanese government also announced the subsidy for the supply chain, and Korean government or other government are more and more now getting interested in investing in the offshore wind energy. I think it's worth spending such money to get recovery and also to progress the climate change tackling. Yeah.
Okay. I think, as Mr. Sunami is still struggling to join, I'll ask one last question to you both, and we'll focus it on Japan, and then we'll have to wrap up, I think. I don't know much about the Japanese market. I know some things, but I'm interested to know for your views as to how you think the Japanese offshore wind market is going to evolve. Have we going to see anything exciting and new developments in the coming years? And are there any things that you would like to see different to improve the rollout of offshore wind and the success of the industry there? Karsten, should we start with you and then go to Yamada?
Yeah. I think the many aspects we have seen, and in Japan, as Karsten introduced, the now Japanese government is working very hard, very quickly, much faster than the last 5 years, 6 years. So we are really appreciating such approach, but also from the technology side to exactly unleash the huge potential of the offshore wind in Japan, we need to develop the very big scale floating offshore wind. But floating offshore is, as a technology, I think it's getting mature, and it's already, I think it's good for the commercial operation. But not only floaters, but also mooring, dynamic cables, and all the repairing work. So we need more the total integrated innovation for not only for the floaters itself, but operation and maintenance and grid connection and everything. So we need a huge initial investment for such incubating the floating offshore as a commercial. So in Japan, we have seen the very ambitious demonstration, the projects really subsidized and supported by the government, but we need more for the cost reduction and the serial production, and serially introduce in the huge utility scale floating offshore wind. So I think Japan has to lead such innovation with creating the bigger market rather than spending the money for the development of each technology, but also to create the market for the floating offshore. So I think that right now we are focused on the fixed foundations development, but in parallel, we need the more support for the floating offshore to going more the attractive the sea area with deeper water.
Sure. I think another innovation you mentioned in your presentation, Yamada, was green hydrogen. And I know that Japan is a world leader in that and has been developing the technology for last 20 or 30 years or so. So definitely potential for Japan to capitalize on that and export it to around the world.
I think so, yeah.
Okay. Karsten, should we finish up with you and ask your views on the Japanese market?
I think Yamada-san has already mentioned a lot of the. It's I think the big leap that Japan needs to take now is bringing offshore wind from a pilot stage into the industrial stage. And the industrial stage means to bring scale to the market, a predictable roadmap, so that industry is attracted, building capacity to supply the right components at the right price. And last but not least, and that's very important, this is a new use of the sea. So a key success factor will also be to have a smooth coordination between the different users of the seas. It may be traffic or the fishing industry. So bringing this all together, and I think Japan has a good consultation process there. So it's not easy, but I think that's one of the key success factors. If conflicts arise around offshore wind developments, this would definitely will be a big problem for the industry to reach its potential anywhere in the world, but of course also here in Japan.
Thank you. Sorry I was cut off for a while, but I was able to listen to the conversation. And thank you, Mark, for taking over. And this is one of the things that we have to learn in online business. But anyway, we are almost time. But I think as Mark led to some of the final points about the possibility of Japan as well. And I was listening some of the challenges that both Karsten and Mr. Yamada has posed. So I think so far, I think this has been a very educational session for me, as well as I hope that the audience had enjoyed some of the, and feel the actual sort of the potential, that the excitement that this sector that we share about the possibility of offshore. And as I mentioned at the beginning, the ICEF really, probably for the first time, took the ocean as a center of innovation for Blue Earth theme. And I think this could be one of the main area in coming 2 years. So we would continue our dialogue, and so both private sector as well as public partnership, and especially, of course, at the United Nations high level dialogue as well. So with that, Mark, firstly, Mr. Yamada, thank you very much for sharing your wonderful thoughts and some of the activities that you're leading in this area. And we had a lot of questions, and I think we were able to cover most of them. And your presentations are also on the website, so that if you are audience that are interested in getting into more details, that we can go and learn from the presentations. Anyway, with this, I'd like to conclude this concurrent session. Thank you again for your time, and it was a great discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.